A very warm welcome to all of our listeners. You're tuned in to Australian News 113, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 27th of January, 2026, and we're really glad you've chosen to spend some of your time with us, digging into some of the most important stories happening right now. Before we jump into our main topic, I just have a small request. If you find what we do here valuable, if our analysis helps you make sense of the world, please take a moment to click that like button, maybe share this broadcast with your friends or family, and subscribe to the channel Australian News 113. Now, why do I ask? Well, in this digital age, the systems that deliver information, they're often called algorithms, they really rely on your feedback. Those simple clicks tell the system that this news is important, that it matters, so you're directly helping us get these reports to more people who want and, frankly, need to be well informed. It's a small gesture for you, but it's a huge help for us. Thank you for that. Today, we have to turn our attention to a very serious and quite a complex subject. Sometimes it feels like the weather outside is a perfect mirror for the national mood. We're seeing historic snowstorms paralyzing large parts of the country, trapping people in their homes and leaving thousands without power. And it's in this climate, with systems already under stress from the cold, that we focus our attention on the city of Minneapolis. A tragic event has unfolded there. The death of a man named Alex Pretti in an incident where the Border Patrol plays a central role. Now, to understand these events not just as headlines, but to really grasp the legal and procedural context, I've brought in some expert help today. With me is Sasha, a respected lawyer and an expert at making sense of complicated legal matters. He's here to help us understand the rules, the procedures, and the implications of what's happening. A very warm welcome to you.
Hello. Thank you for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and with all of our listeners today. I really hope that together we can shed some light on these, very difficult and layered issues.
We certainly have a lot to get through today. You could almost say our theme is systems under stress. There's the stress from the weather, of course, but more importantly, stress on the legal system and on our politics. The main story everyone's talking about is the aftermath of the shooting of Alex Pretti. It happened in Minneapolis and involved an agent from the Border Patrol. We know that on January 25th, which was just one day after this fatal incident, a press conference was held. It was led by Gregory Bovino, the Border Patrol commander.
Yes, that's right. And that timeline itself is the first thing we really need to look at closely.
And that's exactly where I want to start. The reports we're seeing, including from sources like NBC News, paint a picture of a very tense gathering. It wasn't just a standard briefing. Reporters were actively pushing back, questioning Commander Bovino quite aggressively. They were challenging the Trump administration's description of the incident. So for our listeners who might be wondering, why hold a press conference that quickly, just a day after the event? Surely they can't have all the facts yet, can they?
That is an excellent question, and it takes us right to the heart of crisis communication and legal strategy. You see, when a tragedy of this magnitude occurs, a fatal shooting by a federal officer, what's created almost instantly is what lawyers and strategists call an information vacuum.
A void.
An absolute void. They're silent from the official channels. And into that silence, rumors, speculation, and often misinformation, they just grow like weeds.
Meaning if the authorities don't speak, someone else will fill that gap for them.
Precisely. And from an official standpoint, that's incredibly dangerous. From a legal and procedural perspective, a press conference is called that quickly to seize what's known as narrative control. They want to establish the official version of events before any other versions can take root in the public consciousness. It's an attempt to stabilize an extremely volatile situation by saying, here is what we know, or perhaps more accurately, here is what we are prepared to tell you.
I see. So it's about getting their story out first. But the reporters weren't just there to take notes, were they? They were very specifically questioning the words being used to describe the shooting. Why are individual words so important at this early stage? Does it really matter if they call it an incident, an attack, or a tragedy?
In law, words are never just words. Words are tools, and sometimes they're weapons. When the administration or the Border Patrol chooses specific terms, let's say they use words that suggest the victim was aggressive, or they emphasize that the officer was in fear for his life, they are already laying the foundation for a future legal defense.
That sounds incredibly calculated.
It is. It's pure strategy. If they can shape public perception on day one, it can influence potential jurors in a future trial. It also heavily influences how the community reacts, whether with calm or with outrage. So when reporters challenge the description, they're acting as proxies for the public. They're essentially asking, is this description based on facts you can prove, or is this a description designed purely to protect the agency and the officer? They are trying to hold the government to the truth right then and there before a polished narrative becomes accepted as fact.
That's a really crucial point. It's like an early stage legal skirmish playing out in public. Now, there's another detail from our sources. It's being reported that the Trump administration is shifting its strategy in Minneapolis following this incident. When you, as a lawyer, hear that an opposing party is shifting strategy, what does that signal to you?
A change in strategy, especially so soon after an event, is always a red flag. It's a sign of instability. In legal and political crises, you ideally want a consistent line. You want a single story that stays the same from beginning to end. That builds credibility. So when you suddenly shift gears, it's often a tacit admission that the initial response failed.
Failed in what way?
Well, perhaps the public backlash was far stronger than Washington anticipated. Or maybe new evidence has surfaced internally, say, video footage that directly contradicts the initial story they were prepared to tell. A strategic shift suggests that the authorities realize we are on shaky ground here. It means they're having to improvise to get the crisis under control. For any observer, that's a clear signal that behind the scenes, things are anything but under control.
That gives you a real glimpse behind the curtain. It sounds like alarm bells are ringing. I want to shift our focus now, though. Let's move away from the strategists and the lawyers for a moment and toward the human side of this story, because we can never forget, at the center of this legal and political storm is a person who lost his life, Alex Pretti.
Yes, absolutely. That is the core tragedy that so often gets buried under the paperwork.
A former colleague of Alex Pretti has now spoken out publicly. He described Mr. Pretti as a man filled with enthusiasm and empathy. How important are descriptions like that? When it potentially comes to a trial later on, or even right now in the court of public opinion, how much weight do these personal testimonials carry against an official police report?
They are incredibly powerful, and they are vital for a sense of justice. You see, the legal system has a tendency to depersonalize people. In a police report, Alex Pretti isn't a father, a friend, or a colleague. He's a subject, a suspect. He becomes a case number or a problem that was neutralized. The language is intentionally cold and detached.
It strips him of his humanity.
Exactly. But then when a colleague stands up and speaks about empathy and enthusiasm, he brings that humanity right back into the room. He reminds the public, and maybe later a jury, that a human being died here, a person who was part of a community. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance.
A conflict in your mind.
Precisely. People start asking themselves, would a man known for his empathy really act in the way the police are claiming? These character testimonials plant seeds of doubt about the official narrative that force was necessary. And doubt, as you know, is often the key to finding the truth in the legal system.
That's a very profound thought. It helps to rebalance the scales in a way. But we can't talk about Minneapolis without looking at its recent history. One of our sources quotes a former Minneapolis police chief. He's comparing the current public anger to the protests that followed the death of George Floyd a few years ago.
Yes, that comparison hangs very heavy in the air there.
Many of our listeners will certainly remember the images from that time. But what does it mean for a community when that comparison is being drawn again now in 2026?
It means the wounds never healed. Minneapolis has a history, a civic scar tissue when it comes to police conduct and fatal force. When that former chief makes that comparison, it's a warning. He's essentially saying, be careful, this powder keg is about to blow again.
So it's more than just a memory.
Oh, much more. It points to a complete breakdown of trust. When a community feels that the system has learned nothing from the past, that history is simply repeating itself, any faith in law enforcement collapses. And from a legal perspective, that's disastrous. Because without a baseline of public trust, the police cannot do their job safely or effectively. It creates a spiral of escalation.
And we're already seeing that escalation on the streets, aren't we? We have reports of anti-IC protesters clashing with federal officers, and we have a report about a Minneapolis journalist who emotionally described being pepper sprayed while trying to do his job.
That is extremely disturbing to hear.
Can you clarify for us, from a legal standpoint, what are the rights of the press in a protest zone like that? If a journalist is there to report, can they just be attacked with pepper spray? Where does the law draw the line?
In a functioning democracy, the press is supposed to be sacrosanct while they're doing their work. Journalists are the eyes and ears of the public. They are there so that the rest of us know what is happening. Legally, police have a duty to allow journalists to observe and report as long as they aren't actively obstructing police operations. As long as they're not physically getting in the way of an arrest.
But in the chaos of the moment, that line seems to get blurred.
Unfortunately, yes. In the fog of a protest, with tear gas in the air and people running, those lines often disappear. But, and this is critical, if journalists are targeted with pepper spray, especially when they are clearly identifiable as press, that is a massive constitutional violation. It's a direct assault on the First Amendment, on freedom of the press. It suggests that the authorities on the ground are no longer distinguishing between those who are protesting and those who are documenting. And when that happens, those cases often end up in court because it's a clear abuse of state power.
It sounds like an incredibly chaotic and dangerous environment for everyone involved. The snow, the cold, the protests, the police lines. It's good to know there's at least a legal protection there on paper, even if it's hard to enforce in the heat of the moment.
The paper is patient, as they say, but the reality on the street can be unforgiving.
I want to turn our focus now to a technical aspect, but one that is absolutely central to the whole question of accountability. Our sources have confirmed that the Border Patrol agents involved in the shooting of Alex Pretti were wearing so-called body cams.
That is a crucial detail, perhaps the most important one of all.
For our listeners who might not be up on all the latest technology, could you explain just simply and clearly what exactly a body cam is and why it has become such a huge deal in modern policing?
Of course, happy to. A body cam, or a body-worn camera, is a small video recording device. Think of something about the size of a deck of cards or a bit smaller. This camera is attached directly to an officer's uniform, usually on their chest. Its job is to record everything the officer sees and hears during an interaction.
So it's like an electronic witness.
Exactly that. An electronic eye that never blinks and never forgets. In the past, before these cameras, a shooting incident often came down to two things: the officer's written report and, if you were lucky, the testimony of civilian witnesses. Both of those can be subjective, flawed, or biased. With the body cam, we now have an objective piece of data. We can see for ourselves, did the victim really have a weapon? Were verbal warnings given? How quickly did everything unfold? This technology protects the truth. It could protect good officers from false accusations, but most importantly, it protects the public from misconduct.
It sounds like the perfect tool for getting to the truth, but that brings up the question that's on so many people's minds. If this video exists, why aren't we seeing it on the news tonight? Why the delay? Are they trying to hide something?
This is the single most frustrating point for the public, and I completely understand the suspicion, but let me try to explain the legal logic behind the delay. It isn't necessarily about a cover-up, it's about protecting the integrity of a fair legal process.
How so?
Think about the investigation. There's a concept in law we call witness contamination. Imagine you were a witness to the shooting. You saw it from, say, 50 feet away. Your memory is your own. If the police immediately release the body cam footage on TV and you watch it, your brain will unconsciously start to merge the high-definition video with your own fuzzy memory.
So my memory gets overwritten in a way. I'd remember the video instead of what I actually saw.
Precisely. And in court, your testimony would become worthless. A good defense attorney would tear you apart on the stand saying, "Are you telling us what you saw, or are you telling us what you watched on the news last night?" Because of that, investigators have to find and interview all potential witnesses and get their statements locked down before the video goes public. It's a necessary evil, really. We have to wait so that a future trial isn't jeopardized.
That's a very clear explanation. So it's a balancing act between the public's right to know and the need to ensure a clean judicial process down the line.
Exactly. Patience in this case is the price of justice.
Let's stay on the topic of policing for a moment. Another headline we're seeing raises a very difficult question. How can law enforcement safely disarm and apprehend suspects? This gets us to the heart of the use of force debate.
Yes, the core dilemma.
We often hear the term escalation of force. Can you walk us through what the rules are supposed to be? Why is it so difficult to say, just take a weapon away from someone without shooting them?
In the movies, it always looks so easy. A quick shot to the hand, a karate chop.
Chuckle softly. Yes, Hollywood makes it look simple. The reality is quite different. In law enforcement, we talk about the use of force continuum, or the escalation ladder. Officers are trained to proceed in steps. Step 1 is simply their presence in uniform. Then come verbal commands. Then empty hand control, like grappling or holding someone. After that, less lethal weapons like a taser or pepper spray. And only at the very top, as the absolute last resort, is deadly force the firearm.
So what's the problem in practice? The problem is time and distance. If a suspect has a weapon, be it a knife or a gun, an officer has a fraction of a second to decide, is my life or the life of a bystander in immediate danger? The idea of shooting a weapon out of someone's hand is a myth. It's nearly impossible to do under stress and incredibly dangerous. A missed shot could hit an innocent person. The law permits deadly force when an officer has a reasonable fear for their life. But the big question in Minneapolis, and in so many of these cases, is, do it have to get to that point? Could they have created more distance? Could they have spent more time trying to de-escalate?
And does it make a difference that this was the Border Patrol and not the local city police?
It can make a huge difference, actually. The Border Patrol is a federal agency. Their primary training is focused on border security, on confronting threats in often remote, open areas. When you take units like that and drop them into a dense urban environment like Minneapolis, you have a culture clash. Their rules of engagement and their training are often very different from those of a local police force, which might have more training in community policing and de-escalation. It can lead to misunderstandings and, tragically, to situations like this one.
Thank you. That really helps clarify why this isn't a simple question of right or wrong, but a complex mix of training, split-second decisions, and differing agency doctrines.
It's always more complex than it appears at first glance.
I want to zoom out a bit now. We've talked about the shooting and the investigation, but running parallel to the snowstorm and the protests, there's a political storm brewing. Governor Walz has called on people to put politics aside. He's framing this tragedy as a moral debate.
A moral debate. That's a very interesting choice of words.
What does that mean? How is a moral debate different from a political debate? Is that just a talking point?
I think it's more than just a talking point. It's a fascinating and important distinction. A political debate, you see, is usually about power. It's about us versus them, Republican versus Democrat. It's about assigning blame and winning the next election. The proposed solutions are usually new laws or more funding.
And the moral debate?
A moral debate goes deeper. It doesn't ask about laws, it asks about values. What Governor Walz is likely trying to do here is to say, look, we can pass all the laws we want, but if we don't change how we see each other as human beings, nothing will fundamentally change. He's asking, what kind of society do we want to be? It's an attempt to lift the problem out of partisan squabbling and get people to reflect on humanity, on the value of life. He's trying to heal the community rather than divide it further.
That sounds almost philosophical. It's a call for self-reflection instead of just shouting at each other.
That's it, exactly. And reflection is the one thing most needed in these heated moments and also the hardest thing to find.
But while the governor is calling for reflection, it seems like Washington, D.C. is gearing up for a confrontation. We're seeing reports that lawmakers are at odds over the funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, and there's a threat of a partial government shutdown looming.
Yes, the gears of government are grinding loudly.
For our listeners, could you break that down? What is the DHS? What does a partial shutdown mean for the average person? And most importantly, why is this relevant to the situation in Minneapolis? How are these things connected?
They are all connected, and that's the point that's easy to miss. The DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is the massive parent agency that oversees the Border Patrol. It's the very agency whose agents were involved in this shooting. So when Washington starts fighting over the money for that agency, it has direct, real-world consequences. A shutdown means the government turns off the spending tap. Now, essential employees, and that includes Border Patrol agents, have to keep working. But here's the catch. They often don't get paid on time. So imagine the psychological pressure. You have agents in Minneapolis working in an extremely hostile environment under intense scrutiny, possibly fearing for their safety. And at the same time, they don't know if they'll be able to pay their mortgage at the end of the month because of a political fight hundreds of miles away.
That's a volatile mix. Professional stress compounded by financial stress.
Absolutely. A stressed, overworked, financially worried officer is more likely to make poor decisions under pressure. So when we talk about systems under stress, the funding fight in Washington dramatically increases the pressure in the Minneapolis powder keg. It makes meaningful reform harder and the entire situation more dangerous.
So the chaos in the Capitol radiates all the way out to the streets of Minneapolis. You can't separate the funding from the function.
No, you can't. It's all one organism.
There's one last topic in this area we should touch on briefly. It's about technology and the flow of information. There's a platform called TikTok.
Ah, yes, TikTok.
A lot of our listeners' grandkids are probably using it. For anyone who only knows it by name, could you just explain what TikTok is in simple terms?
Sure. Imagine TikTok as a sort of global digital bulletin board. But instead of paper flyers, it's covered in millions of short videos. It's an app on your phone. Young people, and increasingly everyone else, use it to share quick video clips. It can be anything, dancing, cooking tutorials, but more and more, it's also a place for political commentary and eyewitness videos. It's often where you see footage of an event before it ever hits the mainstream news.
Thank you for that. So the news here is that TikTok is denying that it censored anti-ICE content. They're blaming a technical outage. But users were claiming that their videos critical of the Border Patrol were being blocked.
This is the modern dilemma of free speech and information.
Whether it was a glitch or intentional, the result was the same. Information was blocked. From your legal perspective, why is access to platforms like this so critical during a crisis? Isn't it just, kid stuff?
Not at all. In the past, we relied on a handful of major TV networks for our information. Today, platforms like TikTok are often the source of raw, unfiltered news. People on the ground are filming what they see and uploading it instantly. They are the new citizen journalists. When that flow of information is cut off, whether by a computer bug or by deliberate censorship, the public is effectively blinded.
We lose our direct line of sight into what's happening.
Exactly. And in a legal crisis, where we're all trying to figure out the truth of a shooting or a protest, blocking information creates massive distrust. People immediately think, what are they trying to hide? For trust in the rule of law to be maintained, these channels have to stay open. In a crisis, a technical error can be just as damaging as censorship because the result is the same: silence.
And silence creates suspicion. That seems to be a running theme today.
It really does run through every aspect of this situation we've discussed.
We've covered a truly vast amount of ground. Let's just take a moment to recap what we've unpacked here. We started with the tragic shooting of Alex Pretti in Minneapolis by a Border Patrol agent. We saw a high-stakes press conference where Commander Bovino faced tough questions about the official narrative. We've learned that crucial body cam footage exists, but it's being withheld for procedural reasons to protect the integrity of witness testimony. We see how a funding battle in Washington adds stress to the officers on the ground. And amid all this, we hear Governor Walz's call to elevate this from a political fight to a moral debate.
That's an excellent summary of a very complex situation.
Before we wrap up, do you have a final thought for our listeners, something that might help them process all of this difficult news?
Yes, I would. The news is heavy, and the images from Minneapolis are troubling. But I think it's also important to see that certain mechanisms are working, even under strain. The fact that reporters are immediately asking critical questions and not just accepting the official line. The fact that body cams were worn and are securing evidence. The fact that we are able to have this open discussion right now. These are all signs that the system of checks and balances is, at its core, still active.
So it's not a completely broken system.
No, it's not perfect. It's creaking and groaning under pressure, but it is there. I would just encourage everyone to have patience. Wait for the facts. Wait for the investigation to run its course. Try not to rush to judgment based on a single headline. The path of the law is slow, often frustratingly slow, but it is designed, in the end, to bring the truth to light.
Patience and a reliance on facts. That is wise counsel for turbulent times. I want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise. You've helped make these complex legal issues much easier to understand.
It was my honor. Thank you for the conversation, and thanks to everyone who tuned in.
And to you, our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive from Australian News 113. We hope this look into the events in Minneapolis has been helpful for you. And remember, if you found this broadcast informative, please don't forget to click the like button, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue to bring you independent analysis. We will, of course, continue to follow this situation closely and keep you updated as new developments emerge. Until then, please take care of yourselves, stay warm, and look out for your neighbors, stay informed, and stay safe. Goodbye for now.